Hello and welcome to everyone who's here with us today. I've been talking about this for ages. I am so fantastically excited to actually have Jenna here with me. I've been watching Jenna for quite a while and I am fascinated not only by her job, and I promise you, if you stay long enough, we're going to get into that as well, but also by her beautiful garden. I like her style of gardening because it actually touches upon how I like to garden. She's very organic in the way she does things. She works with nature rather than against nature. She doesn't attempt to have pristineness in her garden, and yet she has such a beautiful, fantastic harvest. I know that she has challenges when it comes to pests as well as when it comes to diseases. Sometimes we complain about what we have, but one of the things I've learned from Jenna's channel is I'm grateful for what I have because we do not have it as bad as Jenna has it. Here in the UK, we're okay, regardless of us thinking that we're not. Jenna has a YouTube channel, so everyone, please go over. I promise you go over there. You won't want to come back to me, but you better come back because Jenna's channel is fantastic. It's full of information. And I feel that you can learn a lot from her as a gardener. She has a lot of experience, does a lot of research, likes to get into the details and the nitty-gritty of things, and she'll go down a rabbit hole and not come out until she's satisfied that she's actually found everything she wants to know, and then she's willing to share it with her viewers, which is absolutely fantastic. Jenna, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Stella. Finally, I'm so happy to have this chance to talk with you today.
Yes, it's fantastic. Can you start by telling my viewers where you are in the world, because most of them won't know?
So I am in the United States, in Ohio, specifically in the Midwestern part of the state, so pretty close to the Indiana border. And that
Hmm.
is where I'm at is zone 6A. You guys' zones are set up, I think, a little differently than ours
Yeah.
are. And from what I've been told and from what I've seen traveling to vegetable trials for work, my climate is probably more comparable to what they're dealing with in parts of like Germany and I visited Poland, and the area I was in near Warsaw was relatively similar. I
Yeah.
worked with a Czech company that has a relatively similar climate to mine, so
Hmm.
there's some differences there, but in terms of like temperature and seasonal stuff, they're comparable.
So what I can actually explain to the viewers is in the UK we have what is classified almost like a temperate climate, whilst with Jenna she has more of the extremes of what we have. So when they go cold, they go extremely cold, and when they go hot, they not only go hot but they also go muggy. So they don't have the comfortable temperatures that allow us to grow for longer without necessarily getting disease. With Jenna, the climate that she gets is interchangeable. I think you actually put up a little screenshot of was it the 20 seasons of Ohio or something like that? Where you and I remember it because I was like, you can go from hot to cold to hot to cold to hot,
We do.
which can be, if for a human it's confusing enough, but imagine what it's like for the poor plants.
For the poor plants, that's sometimes I'm honestly amazed that the garden even does half as well as it does, because especially for the annual plants, I mean, the perennials have their own challenges with the climate that we have here, but if you're growing in a season with an annual vegetable, my example is always cauliflower because it's so finicky, where it really prefers, this nice mild cool growing season that stays relatively level. And
Yes.
even if I plant at optimal timing, we're getting like in April, we can have 2 inches of snow on the ground, and 3 days later it's 80 degrees. Then we can have drought, or not drought, but we can have no rain for a week, and then it can be almost like torrential flooding conditions the next week. So, and that's just within like the month of April, and that's kind of what our seasons are like across the board. Um, as you hit on, yes, like I meant to look up the Celsius conversion, and I don't know it offhand.
I know that you go colder than us, and you also have snow, proper snow for a lot longer.
We do.
We rarely, if ever, get snow, and if we do, even a couple of inches of snow is enough to stop everyone moving.
Yeah, we just here on, was it two? It's been 2 days ago now. We had a front come through, and we've got, I don't know what the final measure is, maybe a foot of snow on the ground right now, which
Hmm.
is, compared to some parts of the country, really still not that much, but that's a that's a decent amount for here. But yeah, usually we're looking at a pretty good snowfall. It's less than when I was younger, but I'd say 6, 7, 8 times through the winter. And we're typically Yeah, we are cold, cold. Like I just looked it up. We're sitting at about 0 right now, so like negative 17 Celsius, I think. And the wind chills are like I think 15 degrees colder than that.
Yes.
And then our summers, we're up. We can again, what's the conversion?
It's
It's like
30 to 35 degrees centigrade is
right,
what you
yeah.
get to.
I would say 30, about a little over 90 or right around 35.
Yes.
Is about our high in the summer, and our humidity is killer. I mean,
Yes.
the southeast United States kind of has the reputation for being super muggy and humid. But I think I was looking up some climate data, and this past summer of 2025, we were more humid here in the Midwest than they were in the deep South. And it was like I forget, it's been like a historically humid summer season for us. It is like not pleasant.
It isn't pleasant because what I've actually found out about your environment is winter stops gardening. Whilst here, we can continue to grow, we continue to harvest. If you actually plan wisely, you will still have harvests in the winter to have your cabbages and all your brassicas because they'll grow so beautifully without all the pests that you normally get in the summer.
I've seen some of your harvest. I've seen some of the other English channels out of the UK, and I'm so jealous of that fall, winter, early spring growing season because it looks so nice. And that's we can if I plan right and use the proper like row covers and such, I can overwinter crops, but nothing is actively growing, and I'm not doing any harvesting till the early spring. And that's like I actually don't have any. I didn't even attempt to do it this winter because there's not a whole lot that would have made it through the winter that we've been having this year. We've had a couple in recent years where it's been more mild than normal, and I've been able to
Hmm.
keep things like my hardy greens, my carrots, my root crops. I've been able to keep them going for a good ways into the winter season, and then again, like they kind of hit a dormancy period and then start again in the spring. But yeah, it's rough going here. There's not a whole lot going on in the winter.
I suppose it's good because you then get that rest because there's not much you can do, so you can rest whilst with us because you can still do bits and pieces. You're
Right.
going out there and that can actually lead to burnout, can't it?
It absolutely can. I was thinking about that because there is part of me that, all of us gardeners, I feel like when we are forced inside and we're forced to take a break from it, we miss it a lot. But for me personally, I think it is a blessing actually that we have the seasons that we do here, that I am forced to slow down and to some degree stop for a couple of months here because I'm definitely like my personality type is just like I will go and go and go until I completely run myself into a wall. And if I
Yep.
did not have that forced like rest period, I would have absolutely burned out a long, long time ago.
I get you because that's exactly what I do as well. And people keep asking me, when do you stop? And I'm like, I'll stop when I'm dead. But
Yeah.
for now, I'm alive, I can do it.
And that's the trick with gardening, right? Because there's always
Something to
something
do.
to do. And there's
Yes.
always, even if you think, well, like I got everything done on my checklist, there's an
Yeah.
infinite number of possibilities in terms of like projects that we could be doing.
It's never ending because I'll go out, especially in the summer, because obviously the summer days are long. The sun rises at 4, 5 o'clock and it doesn't set until after 9, 10 o'clock. And I can be out for the whole day and come in at sunset, having come in to eat lunch. I don't do anything. I'll eat when I get home. But once the sun is out, I'm in the garden. So I don't know
Yeah,
if you like that at all.
I absolutely, yes. In fact, I was like that for so long, and I really had to make a conscious effort to stop because you're like, I've got kids that are young and they need to eat.
Yes,
it,
yes,
I
yes.
would, if I were left to my own devices, I would just be out there and not stop.
And
And
that's,
they're like,
yeah.
they're coming out and saying, "Mom, we're hungry. We need to eat." And so I'm kind of forced into taking break periods. And fortunately
Yes.
for us, like our sun doesn't rise till 6:30 here in the summer. So I've got like 2 extra hours of sleep
Nice,
compared to what you're
nice.
getting. But yeah, it really is like I never set out with the intention of doing that. But when the
No.
weather is cooperating and you have daylight,
Yeah.
and I think
Mm-hmm.
because there is always something to do, it is so easy to fall into that. I don't want
It
to
is,
say
isn't it?
like fall into that just spending all day long out there from sun up to sundown.
It's not a trap, it's joy. Right. For someone who's never watched your channel, can you describe your gardening journey from the first seed you ever planted to where you are now as a gardener?
Yeah, so this is something where I haven't really gone into detail with this even on my channel, which I
I
probably need to do
know.
because I think that's helpful for people to know. But I grew up with a gardening family. My dad
Hmm.
grew up on a farm, like I said, 5 minutes from here. They had 10 kids, and it was kind of like if you wanted to eat, you had a garden and livestock
Yeah.
and that situation. So he gardened from the time he was a young child, and when he married mom, they continued to always have vegetable gardens. My mom was more of the ornamental, like flower gardener. She's actually a
Hmm.
master gardener. And has worked in landscaping
Nice.
and various related jobs through the years. So
Yes.
I was always exposed to it. When I was a kid at home, that was honestly like I had no interest. I had no desire. I hated gardening. I did not want to be out there.
Seriously.
Yeah, yeah. I was not a very outdoorsy kid. I wanted to be inside reading or painting or drawing. Mom and dad kind of had to kick me outside. Like I would not go willingly. But yeah, we had a lot of chores, and part of those were,
Yeah.
helping in the garden. So like picking green beans and picking cherries and helping with the weeding and doing all of that was expected of us when we were young. But
Hmm.
I hated it. And I really, as a young, like going to college as a young adult, I moved completely away from it. I actually ended up getting a degree in art history of all things. When I came back, as you might you may imagine, there's not a whole lot of demand for art historians in rural Ohio. So I was
No.
really struggling to find a job and kind of bounced around to various positions and ended up applying for a gardening company that was
Hmm.
relatively close to home. And once I got hired there, it really sparked something where I kind of, it was this like remembrance of, I guess, like more the pleasant things that from the gardening experiences I had when I was young. And I ended up putting a garden at the first couple places I rented. And then when I got my own home, I continued to build a bigger garden, and it just kind of evolved from there. And there was really never this like aha moment or like even this decision that this was going to become my career or become something I was completely wild about. Like if you would have asked me 20 years ago if this is where I saw myself as an older adult, I would have laughed at you. Like, but I think it was just, I always feel like it really is like gardening is almost in the blood. Everyone, and this, my siblings went through a similar process where they were completely removed from it, and all of them at some point have come back to it in some capacity. My sister actually worked at a farm doing production for a very upscale restaurant. My brother has a house now where he's put in his own garden, and none of us had any interest in as kids. So I just think it's
Yes.
funny how it comes back around. But
It does come back, doesn't it? Yeah.
so I guess then when I started working at this company for several years, I did more on the product merchandising side. So I a lot of like selecting what went into catalogs. I started traveling and going to various vegetable and fruit and annual flower trials across the United States and a little bit internationally. And there were things about that I really enjoyed, but I really wanted to spend my time outdoors. It was too much. That job was too much like sitting behind a computer, too much office work. And so when the opportunity arose, I applied at the same company for a job running their R&D trials and to that position. And that just really it felt right. I really enjoyed just being outside, doing the hands-on, being in the garden every day. And it's just kind of evolved from there.
Fantastic. Now, I hope you don't mind that, I want to talk a little bit about your father. And, I'm so sorry for your loss, but I know that I feel like with everything you've told me now, I understand more about how your father played a big role in where you are now as a gardener. So I think he sowed those seeds within you. And even if you didn't realize it and you hated it as a child, you've actually come home in a way, is the way I would actually describe it. And what is it in the gardening that you did with him? I know that sometimes you were angry and you didn't want to do what he wanted you to do, but what little bits of advice did he give you that you find yourself still turning to even now in your gardening life?
So I think as a child, when I didn't have much interest in it, something that dad did that made a big impression on me, and I think on my siblings, was he would typically always allow us to have like a little plot, a little section in the main garden that was ours, that we could pick what we wanted to grow. And
Hmm.
that selection process, that I think just having that, this whole world of opportunities of like I could plant anything in here, was always
Yes.
really, really exciting to me, even as a little kid. Dad was very, he was a very laid back guy. And so there was like, I feel like we had this opportunity, but we didn't, there wasn't a lot of pressure. It wasn't like dad was out there like yelling at us because the garden wasn't weeded or something. It was just like plant it and then whatever happens, happens. And so
Yeah.
it was, like I said, a very low pressure situation, which is nice. And as I got older and as an adult, when I really came back and started doing more gardening, this was after dad retired and I had a big portion of gardens over at he and mom's house. Something that really made an impression on me then, that had kind of shifted with dad, I think, through his years of gardening, was just this really following nature's lead. So the way that dad was raised, and I think the way that many folks around here were raised to farm and to garden, was very
Yeah.
much like kind of how you hit on before. It was like trying to dominate nature rather than
Yeah.
working.
Work with nature.
It was like, we're just, everything's going to be plowed. All the rows are going to be super straight. Like, we're going to spray everything. And so dad was raised with that model of agriculture. And he very much kind of, especially in his later years, went against that model. I mean, he always grew organically, but even in
Yes.
terms of like the straight row crop system, he really had an appreciation for just meandering paths and little vignettes of plantings and like things where you wander into a garden and you don't really know what's going to be around the next corner. We
Hmm.
always joked there's a chunk of land on mom and dad's property that we called dad's wilderness. And
Nice.
used to all be, this was all agricultural fields when mom and dad bought the place. And dad just didn't know what he was going to do with it. He just knew he wanted land. So they had, I think there's about 20 acres over there, 15 or 20
Wow.
acres. He let a portion of it just grow up in whatever, like whatever popped up, popped
Yes.
up. He kept walking paths mowed through there, but otherwise it was just seeing what came up and what happened naturally without human interference. And he became really fascinated with just observing the shifts
Yes.
and the changes over seasons and over years, and was always telling me about this new thing popped up in there and I have no idea where it came from, or like, oh, there's this certain plant that's dominating in there this year, but like 3 years pass and it would completely shift to a different plant.
Mm.
He was just really fascinated by that and really spent a lot of time
Yes.
walking and observing, and more of a hands-off approach. Now, in his
Yes.
vegetable beds, he still had garden beds that looked relatively, normal, straight rows. But even
Hmm.
within that setup, dad just did a lot of, I think I mentioned in one of my recent videos, he would just let volunteer tomatoes pop up. He would
Yes. Yes.
anything pop up naturally out of the ground. He was always very curious to see what it was, how it would do,
What
what
it
would
was. Yeah.
that kind of more hands-off method, I think, really made a big impression on me. And I still, because of the work I do, I can't fully move to that model, but
Yeah.
I'm trying more and more to incorporate that into my, both like my garden and my landscaping beds and the land around our house. Because for one, it's less work. For two,
Yes, definitely.
I think that as long as we as humans are always trying to like fight this battle of winning over nature or dominating over nature, it's always going to be a losing battle. And I think there's somewhere in there, there's a happy medium between doing that and complete chaos, or having nature take over.
Exactly.
And that's really kind of, that's where I want to get with my, because I need to have a little bit of control in order to do my annual vegetable crops in particular, because like a lot of those things aren't native to this area. So they're
Hmm.
going to need more hands-on, more babying, more, weeding, that type of thing. But I'm just trying to get to more of a middle ground between those two extremes, I guess, thanks to dad.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's really, really good to know because sometimes we try and fight nature, and when you fight, you succeed less. So, do you remember the first time you realized that you were good at gardening?
I don't know if I ever realized it. There's still days that I'm just like, I'm pretty awful at this.
No, you're
Because
not. You're not. Why is it
I
that as gardeners, we don't acknowledge the fact that actually I do pretty good?
think, what I realized, which was interesting, is when you're down in it every day, at least for me, I tend to fixate on the things that are going wrong. So I'm
Hmm.
down, I'm seeing every bug, every disease, every fruit that has shriveled. It wasn't until I had a friend come over back probably 3 or 4 years ago. She had a drone.
Yes.
She did some drone footage from way high up of my garden. And when I saw that, and she did the same thing at my mom and dad's place. And when I saw that footage from that distance that was a little bit removed from being right
Yes.
down in it, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this looks really beautiful. And it like, because you can't see all the little like mistakes
No.
and all the little problems. All you see is just
Yes.
green and lush and amazing. And
Hmm.
that kind of helped to shift my perspective where I was like, yeah, like there's still, it's every year that I garden, I just learn how much I don't know and how much more I need
Yes.
to
You
learn.
need to
But
know.
I
Yes.
also have grown in appreciation for like what I am able to accomplish. So I
Hmm.
think I still don't know that I'm like have a green thumb or am like particularly gifted at gardening. I think that I just, for some reason, because I'm not a patient person, I have patience with the garden. And I think it takes a lot of patience and it takes the ability to become quiet and observe and really pay attention to what is happening with the plants. And because I'm able to do that for whatever reason, I think that I have good results. I don't know that it's necessarily that I'm like a great gardener.
But then that is part of being a good gardener, is being patient and taking time and
That is
observing and identifying those things that are going to lead to less success than you're getting. So if you're someone who just looks at everything and is constantly saying, "Oh my God, this is gorgeous, this is beautiful, isn't it wonderful? Look," and ignoring the little bits of imperfections that might impact your harvest, then you wouldn't get the harvest you do.
that is true. That is very true.
So, do you see yourself as a traditional gardener or as an experimenter, taking into consideration that you like to learn and you like to know in order to be better?
I think like I would say I'm probably a mix of both. Maybe
Hmm.
moving a little more into the experimental range. I think because I do notice that my style is based in tradition. I mean, it's based on what I saw my dad do, it's based on what I see many other gardeners do. But I feel like every year I'm looking at a new handful of issues or problems or things I want to improve. And I'm like, okay, what can I do differently? How could I change this? Where can I break the rules and make this a little bit different? And also, like, I feel like I'm pretty good at looking at tradition or rules in gardening and being like, not just taking it for face value, really looking at like,
Hmm.
okay, where did this come from? Why do we have this belief? And is it serving me to still hold on to this?
Fantastic.
If I didn't do that, I would still I'd be out here putting seven dust all over my crops because that's what people did for multiple generations here. It was like we just kill everything. And I'd still be tilling the soil every single
Yes,
season. That's
it's true.
that was something that my dad did for years because his dad
Hmm.
did. Same
Yeah.
thing, and I think that's where I got it. His dad was
Hmm.
always questioning, like,
Questioning. Yeah.
why are we doing this? And towards the end
Yes.
of his gardening lifespan, he really quit. He loved tilling though. So he never quit entirely, but he cut way, way, way back. So it's that ability to constantly question probably puts me in a little bit more of the experimental range.
Yeah, so if you're in the experimental side, I'll classify how you've described it all as being progressive, adaptive to new ideas and new ways that work better than the old, and not just being fixated with what worked before, because we're always learning more, as you know. Now, in terms of the weeds and pests that you encounter in your garden, which weed or pest tests your patience the most?
Oh, there's so many.
I know, I know.
I would say pest wise, it's got to be the cucurbit trifecta, the cucumber beetles, the squash bugs, and the squash vine borer. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other really annoying ones, but I
Mm-hmm.
think those, because I have yet to find a really good solution for dealing with them organically.
Mhm. Yeah.
if you had asked me 5 years ago, I might have said cabbage worms, but I those were once I figured out that I could just net my plants all
Yeah,
the whole season
sorted.
basically. That's a really, really easy solution. But the trouble, and like I also, and I do net my cucumbers and my squash and my pumpkins and those types of things. But because of the growth habit of that class of crops, it's very difficult to keep them netted properly for the entire season. Plus, some of those pests can just kind of get in anywhere. So I typically will keep them netted when they're young, but eventually those nets have to come off. They also, most of those crops require cross pollination unless you're growing a parthenocarpic
It's very
variety.
true. Yes.
You've got to have some, unless I want to hand pollinate, which I can't do at the scale that I
And no,
have. I
not
need
on the
I
scale
need
you've
my
got. Yeah.
I need my bees and other pollinators in there working the crops. So those nets have to come off. And there are organic certified insecticides that will be somewhat effective on those pests, but I'm not big on spraying even
No.
organically approved things. I'm also just, it's more of a, I don't know, I don't want to say laziness because I wouldn't consider myself lazy, but like the spraying, I'm just not good at being diligent with sprays.
Yeah.
So every year I'm constantly trying out interplanting crops to see if anything helps deter the pest, just trying all these different things. And nothing to date has fully worked. So those three with the cucurbit crops continue to just really try my patience.
Yeah. And have you ever had a season where it has been so bad that it nearly broke your confidence and your willingness to even go out in the garden?
Not completely. I've come close. It's recent, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I forget which year specifically, but at
Yeah.
the end of the garden season, even not even at the fully end, like as we were getting into August and we were in drought and it was miserably hot. I mean, even this year was trying. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this just this year. And I've never like sworn off, or next year, I've never sworn off gardening completely, but I have ended gardening season saying like next year I'm cutting way, way back. I am not doing this again. I can't handle this again next year. And then inevitably the garden gets twice as big the next
Yep,
season.
because you start to sow seeds and then you look at the catalogs and there's this that you haven't got that you want, and then there's that. You promised you'd have only 10 tomatoes types and then suddenly you've got 20.
Absolutely.
And what fascinates me, in addition to your pests, are your diseases that you encounter. Now, as I was saying at the beginning, we don't get as many diseases. They exist. We do have a few. However, when I actually look at everything you mentioned when you're talking about the types of diseases you're trying to test for, when you're actually doing all your seed trials, it makes me think, gosh, if only people knew. Can you give us some of the names of the diseases you get as a result of the humidity you get in the summer?
Oh, there's so many. I'm trying to narrow it down to my absolute. I would say with tomatoes specifically,
Yes.
the leaf blight and septorial leaf spot are the
Yes.
ones I struggle with the most
Hmm.
with cucurbit crops and anthracnose, and not so much because of the humidity, but because of the cucumber beetles, bacterial wilt in
Yes.
cucurbit is a big one.
May I just say that bacterial wilt made me lose the will to live, and it's so disheartening to see
It
a
really
whole plant just gone. When you showed it, I was like, what? And it wasn't like
yeah.
they're small baby plants, it's a plant that has managed to grow to a good size, and then suddenly overnight it's just like gone.
Yeah. And inevitably it's when they're really close to maturity. So yeah, exactly. It would be one thing if they were taking out plants that were a couple of weeks old, but you've been helping these things along for an entire season pretty much, and then they taken down, and it's practically overnight. And it's very, very frustrating. I guess one of the good things with as much room as I have here and as much as I plant every year is that almost inevitably, if I have one cucumber or melon go down, I've got another that will survive. For someone who's gardening on a smaller scale and they've got one cucumber planted and it gets taken down, I would be so disheartened. Like that would be really hard to do.
Yeah. Do you tend to succession plant as a result in order to try and have some seedlings that can take over what is being killed off? Or because I also know you do a lot of polyculture where you interplant with other plants. so that you
Mhm.
try and hide some of your plants, but do you also succession sow?
I do. Always, every year, I intend to do a little bit better job succession sowing because I could be doing it more. Typically, I usually do cucumbers, I usually do summer squash every single year as a succession planting because with those crops, it's pretty much a guarantee that I will lose them at some point in the season.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I'm usually able to get multiple really good harvests off of my plants before they go down, but it's gonna happen. So I usually do at least like my normal planting time, which for those crops would be post frost about May 15th or later. So I'm typically planting from mid-May to early June on my first planting, and then I'm waiting like usually about July 4th. I can do another summer squash, zucchini, cucumber planting, and then I'm able to get another harvest before the fall frost comes in. Those can be tricky because the insect and the disease pressure is even more significant in that part of the season. But typically, if I can get them through that really rough period, I can get a nice second or like a usually one or two harvest off again before the frost, and it's worth it. For my longer season stuff like winter squash, pumpkins, melons, my season's just not quite long enough to do that. And then for a lot of my other crops that are a shorter maturity window where succession planting does make more sense, I don't have a strong reason to, other than like a continued harvest. In terms of pest and disease pressure, I don't have a strong reason because usually I'm able to keep those going for the duration of the season. So I'm thinking things like my hardier leafy greens, like kale, chard, collards, those types of things. I can plant those in the spring and have them clear up until the winter because I can protect those from the pests. They don't get a lot of diseases. Things like my tomatoes and my peppers, I think because I'm planting so many different varieties and they all have different maturity windows, it's
Yeah.
kind of succession by default. And then there's things like lettuce where I've got a pretty small window of cool season weather that
Yes.
I can't do a ton of successions, but typically I'll do like an early March. I'll do maybe an early March, an early April, and a mid-April for things like lettuce. And then I do a similar succession in the fall. The other way that I kind of succession plant is I typically will start almost everything indoors. And then I'll also do a direct sowing. So lettuce, for example, it's an easy crop to direct sow, but I like having that really early season jump start. So I'll start a batch of my lettuce indoors in February, and then I also will direct sow a crop out late March-ish, and that will
Hmm.
kind of give me another succession.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I know we've talked a lot about your garden and how you ended up realizing that you prefer to be outside doing the gardening rather than indoors doing the work with the job that you do. Now, for me, my garden is my haven. I actually call it my therapist, and it's also my gym because the amount of physical work it takes to have a good garden is a lot, and it's also my joy. What does your garden mean to you, and what does it give you?
So I love that. I could second everything that you just said about yours. I feel the same way about mine,
Yes.
just so much so.
Yeah.
In fact, I've had people ask me what my workout is in the summer, and I'm like, I don't. It's from being
Yeah.
in the garden and hoeing and pulling weeds and lifting stuff and just on my
Yeah.
feet all day long. So
Yeah.
it's definitely saves on a gym membership that way. To a bigger degree, my you said your haven, your therapist, so much so. Um,
Yes.
Years ago when I was still working remotely at an R&D farm, I had a young assistant who came to work with me, and he struggled with a lot. Like he had intense anxiety to the point of almost like panic attacks and just was really struggling, I think, with mental health overall. And I remember sitting down with him one day out in the field and being like, look, I completely understand. I understand what you're going through. I have struggled with a lot of this stuff myself. I'm like, this work is one of the few things that have moved the needle in any way in terms of improving my mental health in general. It's something about being outdoors, hands in the soil, moving.
Exactly.
I mean, for all humans, but I think
Hmm.
that some people can maybe get away with not doing it. I
Hmm.
can't, especially as I get older. There's just more of a if I go for too long without my like outdoor fix, I'm miserable.
Yep.
We kind of went through early January, we were having some miserable weather. We were stuck inside. I was really, really struggling stuff. And we had a little, like I think about 5 days in there where the weather got, it was like I think 50 degrees, which after being sub-freezing feels like the
Yeah.
tropics. And I went
Yeah.
outside for 2 full days and worked in the garden from sun up till sundown. I was a
Yes.
completely different person after that. I try this. I talk to people about this, and I think sometimes I get over passionate or they think I'm crazy. But like, I cannot stress enough how important I think this is, and that I really
Mm,
think that everyone living on the planet today, if they're not already doing something that gets them outdoors, like gardening is
yeah.
such a therapeutic hobby. It's so good for people, and I wish that more people could experience it.
Because people now talk about earthing, don't they? How
Yeah,
important it
yeah,
is to earth. And yet it's something that you naturally do when you have your hands in the soil, you're kneeling in the soil. Often when it's warm, I won't even wear shoes once I get to my gardens. It's barefoot and just working. And, so much joy in it. And now
yes.
people are actually making shoes that supposedly help you to earth. Just go out into the garden and do a bit of gardening, and that will actually give you that earthing that you're looking for. Now, I think this is the perfect point for us to actually move on to what you do for work, because I know that we've hinted at it. But can you tell everyone what it is you do? Because you mention it in your videos.
Yeah, so I am a seed trial manager, and this is something that I've done for almost 10 years now, I think. As I touched on before, I started
Hmm.
doing this line of work when I was still working for a gardening company just north of Dayton, Ohio, and they had like a full R&D farm. There were breeding programs going on. There was a whole mix of edible vegetables, fruits, ornamental plants. With that specifically, I was growing out crops, evaluating them for just one company. And what I was doing was every single year I'd have a list of new items that were coming out from breeding programs and big seed companies across the world, and picking out the ones that we thought would work for this specific brand, growing them out all season and evaluating them. So I was doing, the planting, the day-to-day maintenance, the harvest, and then also keeping all of the notes, monitoring performance and disease resistance, measuring yields, doing taste testing, which was my favorite part and continues to be my favorite part of the whole job. So I was doing that specifically with vegetables, some herbs, mostly annual herbs, and then some annual flowers. But we also had a fruit program, which while I didn't have to do the work, I got to be involved in
Try
the
out the
taste
fruit.
for
Yeah.
that too. So that was pretty
Nice.
cool. And
Yeah.
then in 2020, thankfully, just before the pandemic hit, this company was downsizing their R&D program and had approached me about the idea of doing this as an independent consultant role. And
Yeah.
it really, really worked out well for me because this meant that I got to do essentially all the same stuff, but at home in my own garden. And right before the pandemic hit, we had this all set up. So that whole year, while everyone was, struggling with all the changes that were going on and all the restrictions, I was able to just sit in my garden at home and be in my own little paradise and do the work. Everything was going to be remote anyway, so it worked out really, really well. And I've continued to do that since that, going on 6 years now. And so I still do some evaluations for my old company. I grow on sometimes breeders that are not selling direct to consumer. They're doing more like they will sell to the big seed companies that are then selling to the garden. They have a lot of those companies have breeding programs, and sometimes they'll send me stuff just to see how it performs for me, because the disease and pest thing is a big draw, because if you want to see if something is resistant, if you grow it here, you're going to find out real quick.
Because you got a lot of options of everything, don't you?
Yeah. So I do some of that. I also have started doing more volunteer work because there's several really cool programs out there that do trialing and are just on a volunteer basis. So I've volunteered for the All American Selection Trials, doing
Yes.
I've done the seed linked trials for several years in a row. And so that is more, I like doing those because I get to see some different material than what I would typically grow for standard trials. And then I've also been able to shift that to I do a lot less for hire trialing now than I did years ago, and that's because
Hmm.
I want to be able to focus on what I'm interested in versus, just growing what is sent to me every single year. So at this point, I've pulled back and I'm doing about 25% trialing for other companies, and then the rest of my garden is just stuff that I'm curious about.
Fantastic. Would you say that being a seed trial manager, especially when working from home, is the ideal job for a gardener, or does it take a lot of work?
I think for a lot of gardeners, it would be for a lot of serious gardeners. If you're
Hmm.
someone who is gardening and, like you said, you're that type of person where you're out there from sun up to sundown all growing season, and like you're going to be that obsessed with it anyway, it's probably a good fit.
Yes.
For, a lot of the, not to put any shade on anybody, but for like your fair weather gardeners who
Yes.
do not want to be out there in late July, August in the miserable heat and the bugs and everything else, this is not a good career choice because
Yeah,
as
because that's when you need to
wonderful.
be out there, isn't it?
Yes, when you need to be out there. My highest number of hours per week is always right around mid-May when everything like frost-free date and everything is going in. All the warm
Hmm.
season crops are going in. And then yes, like July, August, when a lot of those harvests are happening, a lot of that
Hmm.
maintenance work is happening, and then like fall
Hmm.
crops are going in as well. And it is
Hmm.
absolutely the most miserable time of year that has ever existed. And even people that are in my sphere of, people I've known through this job that do the same kind of work. It's like every year we're all in August, we're like, why are we doing this? Why did we pick this career? Why can't we be just sitting in an air conditioned office somewhere? We all know
Uh-huh.
why. It's just fun to complain sometimes.
It is fun to complain. So, in the trials that you do, is there a crop you had great difficulties growing where you could even start to report on what you were required to report?
The only thing that I can recall that happening with is I tried to grow jicama, which is not happy in this climate. We don't even have a long enough season to grow it to maturity, but the idea I was going to try to grow it in the greenhouse, and that was a complete failure. And yeah, I had to go back and be like, look, I can't grow this. I think if someone in my area had the full heated greenhouse, you could. I
Yeah.
don't have that, so it was not something that I was even going to be able to do. Otherwise, there are times that I will give caveats, usually every year, if I'm sent anything so watermelons are okay, but anything like cantaloupe, honeydew, anything in that melon class, I
Hmm.
will always give with the caveat that, like, look, I will plant this out and I will grow it, but I am not guaranteeing we're going to get a mature specimen for evaluation because again, with the pest and diseases, it's just too
Hmm.
unpredictable. Most of the smaller commercial growers that grow those crops, so the melons and pumpkins in particular around this area, they're just spraying them like crazy with multiple applications of really, really nasty stuff. And I will straight up tell like the people that I'm working with that like that's not going to happen.
And now, when
So
you think of it, when it's so difficult to actually grow a plant such as the melons or the jicama because you don't have the season, how much of our harvest and growing successes are a result of the seed quality versus the soil or how we look after the plants and temperature? Do you think that sometimes it's the seed rather than the soil?
it absolutely 1,000% can be the seed. And in fact, I just had a question about this in a recent video pertaining to onions. Grower was trying to grow them and they were having no germination and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with a crop like onion. I think I told her like I pretty much always every year buy fresh seed because onions are notorious for the losing seed vigor very, very quickly. And usually if I have a packet, they'll grow great. The first year I go to plant them, the second year I might have 25% germination. The third year I'm getting nothing. And that's going to vary by vegetable class. There are some, like the brassicas are notorious for a very, very long seed life. They're very durable seeds. I know a guy that kept broccoli seed in his freezer that is 20 years old and the germination is still perfect.
Wow.
But it varies a lot. Spinach is, I tend to have problems with spinach seed. I like to have fresh spinach seed every 1 to 2 years because that germination drops off really quickly. So it's going to vary a lot just based on the vegetable class. The other ways that seed can affect that is so seed companies by law have to have their seed lots tested for germination rates it keeps changing, but I think it's like it used to be yearly. It might be like every 8 months now or something. They
Okay.
have to have that. And they'll typically have that stamped on a seed packet, like this one that
Yeah.
I'm looking at now is packed for
Expires.
2026.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then usually seed packets will have a lot number on them. And if you would call the seed company, if that germination standard is not stamped right on the seed packet, if you call a seed company and give them that lot number, by law, they should be able to tell you what the germination rate on that lot was.
Ah,
So all of that to say that every lot is going to vary. Even within a
yes.
specific crop, within the same variety, you'll have like, say, if you're growing Silver Queen corn, typically a commercial grower is going to have a batch of that grown in the United States. They'll have a batch grown in Chile. They'll have a batch grown in China. And that's because they get multiple growing seasons. And every single one of those production lots, even though it's the same variety from the same year, is going to have a slightly different germination rate. So that's going to change your results. There's also some argument that where the plant that the seed was harvested was grown is going to change your
Yes.
results, because there is now
Yes.
that I think goes back more. It's more readily seen when you're saving seed and selecting to a specific climate. But I've heard people argue even over one generation, it can make a difference. So if I were to grow, and we'll use Silver Queen as the example, if someone here locally were growing Silver Queen seed for seed sales and I used their seed versus buying it from Chile, in theory, the stuff grown here might perform better for me. The other thing is that unfortunately within the seed, so especially for home garden seed, there is some difference within, again, even if you're buying the same variety, some companies will buy and sell lower vigor, lower germinated rate seed because they can get it for cheaper, versus some companies make a point to always sell brand new fresh seed with higher germination rates. And you'll see this there. When I first started in the industry, it was actually kind of a running joke, was that the home garden companies got they would say the sweepings off the seed room floor, because the companies could sell that for cheap, and they'd give it to their
Yes.
home gardening sectors versus their commercial growers who absolutely had to have the best seed. That it's not as bad as that anymore, but there's definitely still a difference in the quality of seed that you're going to get from someplace. I always use here in the States, Johnny's seed as an example of like top tier quality. There's stuff that's really expensive, but pretty much if you buy packets from them, that's going to be really high quality seed. Meanwhile, if you go into your local box store and we have a brand here called Fairy Moore that they sell for like 99 cents a seed packet. Even if I were to go in and buy the same variety, my results are not going to be as good using that as they would be with like a Johnny's or a Gurney's or a Burpee seed packet. So it's a very long-winded answer to your
No, it is,
question
it
about
is, it is actually very, very interesting, because now I'm thinking in my head, if I go and actually get sold seeds that are extremely cheap, say, like, as you say, they're 99 cents, and then someone else is selling those same seeds for, say, $2 or $3, the quality of the $2 or $3 seeds is going to be better than the quality of the 99 cents, because they're both still going to need to make a profit. And it's not necessarily that they're getting a bigger profit margin. It's just that they're providing you with a better quality seed, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Typically, yes. I mean, I wouldn't go so far to always say that, because I think there's probably seed companies that just mark their seeds way up.
Greedy.
Like, yeah, because greed. But in general, from what I have seen here, at least, you're getting what you pay for. There's definitely within the seed world, there is a big discrepancy in seed quality.
And now we move on a little bit, still staying on seeds, but in this day and age, there's a lot of fear of genetically modified crops and seeds. And from your knowledge and understanding, is there a seed that we grow today that has not been modified through some level of breeding? And I'm including heritage seeds in this.
Yeah. So no, I do not think there is. And the reason I say that is because even if you look at an open pollinated heirloom heritage seed, a carrot or broccoli, the way that a carrot or anything in the brassica family looks today, even a heritage breed, is not the same plant that it derived from thousands of years ago. So most people have heard about how carrots in particular look nothing like a carrot did in the, I think, like the medieval times. That has all been altered due to human interference. Corn, sweet corn, even open pollinated heirloom sweet corn is nothing like corn that was grown in South America originally. There's every crop that we know, and I can't think of an example actually of a garden crop that we would grow today that has not changed from its original state, even if it is an heirloom or open pollinated variety. And again, this is just due to human interference, human selection. Moving a step beyond that, with our heritage, we call them heirloom seeds here, open pollinated
Yes.
varieties. So typically the standards vary, but the definition I like to use for an heirloom variety is it's open pollinated and it's older than 50 years old, and it has been passed down through usually generations. Even if we're to look at a variety like that, somewhere along the line, that was selected. So someone at some point went out in their garden and was like, ooh, that tomato really tastes good. I'm going to save seed from that and plant that next year. And that process went on and on and on and on until we ended up with, all of our mortgage lifters and brandywines and all the really fabulous heirloom tomatoes, for example.
That's
And
very,
then
very
a step,
fascinating.
it really is. The history of seed and seed selection and variety selection is fascinating.
Uh-huh.
Like you want to go a step beyond that, then we have hybridization where technically a hybrid could occur in nature because all that's happening is you're cross-pollinating two varieties. So if we have a brandywine tomato and purple Cherokee tomato in our garden, and those plants get cross-pollinated, we end up with a hybrid cross if we save those seeds and grow them out the next season. So again, technically that can happen in nature, but what usually happens is you have plant breeders who are making specific cross-pollination crosses because they are looking for specific traits. So if they have a tomato that has really amazing eating quality but poor disease resistance, they have a tomato with really poor, or really great disease resistance, they might cross the pollen of those two flowers, grow that population out, save the seed, and then save whichever plants perform the best. And then that process just continues. So in all of those ways, there has been a human hand in the change and the selection, regardless of whether we're talking about heirloom, heritage, open pollinated, or hybridized varieties.
Thank you so much. So what I'm gathering from this is the fact that the F1 seeds we have now are similar to how the heritage seeds were created a long time ago by people, being selective in what they kept, or in some cases cross-pollinating to try and create a breed that is fantastic in the ways they want. Would you say that the F1 varieties we get now are similar but a little bit more hybridized in the way that things are done because science has actually moved on and our knowledge is better? Do you feel that the processes are kind of similar, but maybe the F1s are more controlled?
I think that, yes, there's definitely the F1, the hybrids, even beyond that, F2 and F3 hybrids, the process is definitely more hands-on. There's definitely more human interference, but I don't find that that's a bad thing, because usually it's going to give us a plant with improved qualities. I know that there's a whole school of thought out there that's kind of anti-hybridization of any form, that really is like really all about only growing open pollinated and saving seed. And there is a whole argument to be made for that. But just in
Yes.
terms of ending up with a plant that usually is easier to grow, is going to give you higher yields, those kind of advantages that often make it easier for a beginner grower, I think hybridization has a lot to offer. Now it is interesting because even within open pollinated varieties, there
Yes.
can be a lot of human interference there too, because I'm just thinking about, specific crops, specifically like beans and peas, which
Yes.
there are no hybrids. They are all open pollinated, but
Yes.
the way they end up with new cultivars or new varieties is through human selection. So they will find,
Yeah.
like, they do a lot of pea and bean breeding out in like Washington state and Idaho in the United States. And I've been out to the breeding trials, and they will have acres and acres and acres of seed that they'll plant out. And then they've got their breeders out there will look for anything throwing off types, any kind of difference in variance in terms of whatever quality they're looking for that's showing up in these populations. And then they'll save that seed, and then they'll grow that population on. And that process goes on sometimes 6, 7, 8 generations. And that's still an open pollinated seed, but that's an awful lot of human interference to get to that finished variety.
I'm also thinking of the small scale gardener who has a few open pollinated tomatoes, different varieties, all growing in the same space. What are the chances that there's some level of cross pollination that actually happens in that process?
It's probably absolutely guaranteed to happen, because unless you're isolating, at least I'm thinking like with our insect population here, if I were not to isolate, even if I were to only grow one variety, but even then it's highly likely that I might get something from a neighbor. So unless you're isolating like with netting or bagging the flowers, it's highly likely that you're going to get a hybrid essentially after the next season.
That is very, very fascinating. Now, I wanted to know because we have quite a strong growing community here, not only on YouTube, but also locally. You tend to end up meeting other people who love gardening. And do you have such a similar community where you live?
There's not anything super big or super organized in this area. While there are a lot of gardeners, I think just with it being more rural, there's not a whole lot of the opportunity is just not there. I see more of it like in Dayton, which is probably the closest large-ish city to where I live. There's definitely more garden communities. There's a lot more community gardens in general, and then also a lot more programs that are serving gardeners. The Metro Parks has a big community garden program and that type of thing. Here, right here locally where I live, there's a small community garden. Those tend to often be kind of centered around more flowers and ornamental gardening. And I'm not really involved in any of those. And it's not for lack of want, it's just time and resources.
You're
And
busy.
yeah, really not enough
Yeah.
hours in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you were to have your gardening space that you have now again, would you change anything? And if you would, what is it you would change about the layout?
Yes. So I would, yes, there's so much I would change. There's so much I don't even know where to start with that. I think the first thing, I don't know, I have a tendency to either way over research and over plan, or to just jump into things with absolutely no thought. Like there's no middle ground. It's one or the other. And with the garden, I just jumped in with no thought whatsoever. Like I the thing probably that I would change at this point, starting over, is just in terms of layout.
Yes.
Because I started relatively small, and then it just grew and grew and grew and grew, and there wasn't really like a whole lot of planning. The biggest complaints I have with it now is that I would have probably made my walkways bigger, because
Yes.
everything is so narrow in there that I can barely get a wheelbarrow through most of my paths, let alone. My son is always offering to help me with stuff, but he wants to haul a little wagon with his four-wheeler, which would be
Yes.
so handy, but there's not enough space. We cannot get
Not
that
enough.
into my garden.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
was laughing about that because I've got exactly the same problem. My paths are so narrow, but the beds are so big. So
yeah,
redesigning, you would change the pathways.
I would absolutely change the pathway. I would keep my beds and my planting rows about the same, because those I was careful to keep like pretty much. I have to be able to reach the middle of the bed or the row from
Hmm.
kneeling on the outside. And I'm really careful to keep that width in mind whenever I create new beds. So I feel like my beds are good. It's just the walkways. And then the other thing that I don't know how I would change it, because having the fence up is really, really nice, because it does help protect the garden from all kinds of critters. But the fence is also problematic because, again, like a couple of years ago, my husband went out and got a small tractor for stuff that he needed. And there's been all kinds of things since then that he's like, well, I could just do that with the tractor, but we can't get the tractor into the garden. So it's like, especially with things like hauling mulch and hauling wood chips, where
Yes.
I'm doing like 1,000 trips by hand with a shovel and a wheelbarrow. If I had planned better for mechanical implements. We could just do one great big load with a tractor and be done. And
Hmm.
that's the kind of stuff where, yeah, I'm not sure exactly how I would do it different, but I would probably do that
You'd
differently.
probably try. Yeah. Oh, that is
Yeah.
fascinating. Now, as a YouTuber, would you say that the way you garden now is different to the way you used to garden before you actually started sharing your gardening journey? Because I feel like it makes you a little bit more intentional in what you do and why you do it because you will have to explain it to other people. Do you feel that that has actually then led to a little bit more successful growing because you're planning more and being more intentional?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think it has definitely changed some of the things I do. You're saying talking about making you more intentional definitely
Mm-hmm.
resonates.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself planning things out a little more. I find myself questioning even more. I think that's been a
Mm-hmm.
big thing for me is I think because people are asking me questions, I love that because I'll get a question and I'll be like, I don't know. And then I will go down a whole rabbit hole of like, why is this way? And I never thought to question this myself. It's incredibly time consuming, but it's also fascinating to me. And I love that it changed, kind of shifts my perspective on things. I think too, it's also made me more experimental in my gardening because of those questions. I will usually have like a knee jerk reaction of like, oh no, that won't work. But then I'm like, but how can I show that this won't work? And then that leads to setting up a lot of the experiments that I do. And then
Mm-hmm.
because I want to be able to show like tangible, visible proof that what I'm saying is legitimate. And so, yeah, a lot of my gardening experiment videos have come specifically from questions and just
Mm-hmm.
questioning the norm of like how things are done. And it's kind of funny because related to that, I think with the internet is amazing for a lot of things, but spreading misinformation is not one of them. And unfortunately, as with everywhere within the gardening world and community, there is a lot of misinformation on the internet.
There
And
is,
also, a
isn't
lot
there?
of misinformation gets a lot of social interaction and therefore gets pushed in front of more people. So that's been something that I have really, like, something that I probably never would have done just for myself, but have felt really strongly about doing is like some of these like myth busting gardening experiments where the one that drives me nuts that jumps to mind is like where people will say like just put a banana peel in a pot of dirt and then plant like a rose and it's supposed to make it's supposed to be amazing potassium fertilizer and they'll show like this AI picture of a rose that looks amazing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
those are the kind of things where if I were just gardening by myself, like I already know that's not going to work. I'm not going to try
Yes.
that. But then since I'm doing this YouTube channel, I'm like, oh, this would actually be really fun to set up this whole video where like I put a banana peel in a pot and then put like a potassium based straw heavy fertilizer in a pot and then put a whatever other crazy things the internet says in a pot and then grow these plants and then actually be able to show the result. And yeah, though, like I said, I never would have done that for myself, but they're fun, even being able to see the results because it's not always what I expect. So that I think that more than anything has changed what I do.
We're now going on to that quick 5 question round. So, what's the one crop you'll never stop growing?
I mean, it's pretty basic, but tomatoes, like
Yes.
I've never
Yeah. No, no, I'm the
there are
same.
so many.
Yours. And one crop you're taking a break from.
So this year I have decided I'm not growing radishes because I don't like to eat them. I'm also not grow. I don't think I'm going to grow eggplant this year because I don't like.
Mm,
I will eat it like once, and I just like I grow it every single year. I think eggplants are beautiful. I like taking
they're
photos of
pretty,
them.
aren't they? Yeah.
They are so pretty, but I don't really. No one in my family likes them, so I don't think I'm going to grow any this year.
Wow. I grow them because they're pretty and they've got the beautiful soft leaves, especially the black beauty leaves. They are so nice. They've got such a lovely texture. I just, love to see them in the garden. But like you, I don't necessarily eat them,
Yes.
but I'll give them away. That's what I tend to do. I give
Yeah.
them away. And one gardening job you love above all others.
Eating. that's that's not really a job, but
I know it.
that's my favorite part.
Oh, wow.
I mean, beyond that, I'd probably say I don't know that I love it beyond all, but I find an odd kind of therapeutic quality to mulching and tending the soil, all things to do with soil health. So planting cover crops, terminating cover crops, putting down
Mm,
leaf mulch, putting down grass mulch.
hmm.
I think because for me, it's one of those things where I can just do it on autopilot and I can
Yes.
listen to my music or listen to an audiobook and
Hmm.
there is just something really soothing about it.
And what's the one job you dislike and tend to procrastinate about?
Watering. I hate watering. I just hate it. And so I don't have to do it that much, so I really shouldn't complain, but like when
Yeah.
I do, it just irritates me to no end. And as big as my garden is, I know I should absolutely have some
Yeah,
type of irrigation system set
you
up, but I
should.
don't because I don't want to mess with that either. And we tend to have issues because our water is so hard here. Any type of
Yes.
irrigation system that I
Will
have
block
used in
up.
the past, they block up, they have to get replaced. And
Mm.
I'm like, I don't want to mess with it. So then I end up
Mm.
inevitably like watering and I hate it. I hate it.
It always takes so long to do, a lot longer than you realize it will. And I think it is
It,
tedious. So I don't blame you.
yes.
Right. Thank you so much. We're going on to the desert island garden, and these are the questions. So you're going to be stranded on an island, and I'm going to get you to choose the climate for your island. What climate are you going to choose?
So while being stranded on a tropical island sounds lovely, I
Hmm.
feel like my chances of survival and success would be better if I were living on an island with a climate that is maybe more similar to mine, but not as cold. I'm gonna say like maybe something closer to your climate.
Okay. All right. So you're stranded on an island that has a climate similar to us, and when it's on 9A, we're not as cold, but we're also not extremely hot. And you've got
Yeah.
one packet of seeds in your pocket. What vegetable is that packet of seeds going to be, and why?
So this is maybe I should have thought through my climate thing better because I don't even know how well like I want to say winter squash, but then I'm like I don't know
Yes,
how well that would actually do in that
it
climate.
grows
I'm
actually very
assuming there's
well.
some
They
okay.
grow very,
So
very
I'm gonna
well.
go with winter squash because I'm thinking survival and I'm thinking what vegetable is gonna give me the most caloric density per I
Yes,
can't, everything else is just too low calorie. So I'm gonna go with
yes.
winter squash.
And you can actually eat the squash itself, and then you can also eat the seeds as well. So
True. Yeah.
fantastic. Very clever. And on your island, you're allowed to bring one type of flower that you can actually grow from seed to bring you joy. Which flower would you choose? Just one flower.
Oh,
Mm.
I would probably go with calendula
Yes.
because I know that grows well in
Yeah,
that type of
anyway.
climate.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it does beautifully here too. Like
Yeah.
my knee-jerk reaction is to say sunflower, but I think
Mm.
calendula because I that's one flower in my garden. It is so low maintenance, puts up with all the weather. It's like alive super early, super late in the season. It's a great forage source for pollinators, and it's just so they're so pretty, and there's
They
such a
are, aren't they?
variance in the
Exactly.
bloom shape and color. I think that's what I would go with. Oh, and I can use it for like herbal like tinctures and
You have
stuff
a
too.
remedies
So
and all that. Yeah, that's very, very true. And now you can only have one tool with which you do all your gardening. Which tool would you choose and why?
choose the soil knife or like I see them called hori hori knives,
Yes.
kind of that stainless steel 6-inch
Yes.
blade with the
Yep.
braided edge because I have found in having them for myself here that I use them for a whole lot of stuff. Like they're just a really
Hmm.
handy tool to have.
Yep.
My second, if I
It,
had a second option, I'd probably bring the homie or the Korean hand hoe. Those go by a bunch of different
yes,
names
those
too.
ones, they're quite good for weeding easily, isn't it?
That I actually, yeah, I use that probably more than anything in my actual garden, but I'm thinking of like survival type. I think the soil knife would be more useful.
Now, you're allowed one companion or guide for wisdom. Who or what would you choose and why?
Well, I don't like not that he could offer me a whole lot of like gardening related wisdom, but
Hmm.
it would have to be my husband because he's like one of those
Ah.
guys that just like can figure anything out, any problem he can figure out. He
Hmm.
can make it, he can build it, he can fix it. He is like just super calm in stressful situations. Yeah, if I had to, and plus like I like him more than anybody else.
Oh, that is so fantastic. No, no, that is absolutely brilliant. That is lovely. You're the second person who's actually said that. Because one of my previous guests from Yip, he chose his wife as well. And he said exactly something similar that, she's wise and she helps him to make decisions and pulls him back when He needs to be pulled back. It's great. No, that's absolutely fantastic. It's great to have actually chosen someone who's such a perfect partner for you. And if you were to have one non-gardening item to keep you company on the island, what would it be? Which item would you choose?
That is such a I would choose a pen and a notebook
Nice.
because
Yes.
that when I have a whole lot of spare time, like between drawing and like sketching and writing and just journaling and that type of thing, like I would be really amiss if I did not have that being stuck in a place
Mm-hmm.
like that, I think.
Oh, that's fantastic. And if you were told, being an artist, this is going to be the perfect question for you. You are told that you're going to be rescued from this island, but before you leave, you need to carve a message into a tree in order that anyone else stranded there who is a gardener will have this piece of advice. What would your advice be for them?
It would be something to the effect of like start with the soil. It would be
Mm,
if you're going to survive here and you want to grow a garden and feed yourself, that before you do anything, make sure that that soil is healthy because that's going to make everything else so much easier.
Thank you so much. I hope that everyone enjoyed this interview with Jenna. Please do check out her channel. You will learn a lot. And I hope that you will see that in this video, she's shown you a little bit of the knowledge. She's a fount of knowledge. She's been working with seeds and growing plants for so long and working with experts who spend their time creating what we actually then grow within our garden. So please do check her out. And she's always happy to answer questions. She's currently running a series on her channel where she's asking her viewers to ask any questions to do with gardening. And she's actually doing a series where she'll answer a few questions in each episode in order to help you grow more and more successfully as a gardener. So please do check her out. Jenna, thank you so much for saying yes.
Thank you